Hi and welcome to week 5 of Maya Bifrost training. This week we're going to look at the exciting world of accelerators and colliders. Accelerators and colliders work in Bifrost to move water by either intersecting geometry with it or by using geometry which, just like your friends in high school, can influence you to move in a certain direction. We're going to be running through in this class how to set up accelerators, how to set up colliders, all the settings you can put onto accelerators to get explosive or subtle effects on your water. It's going to be really cool. Accelerators are a great part of Bifrost. And without any further ado, let's get started. All right, to have a look at accelerators, we're just going to open up the scene that I've set up, which is the really fun to work with bullet impact scene. So what this is a small test section of the James Bond bridge with the bullets that I set up because I was wanting to test how the bullets would react to the water, how the water would react to the bullets. So the thing with water collisions is often you would assume that, if you had bullets firing out of the helicopter that were really small, like a gun, at the right velocity, you would just realistically get the effect you were looking for. But that actually isn't the case. A lot of times with simulation, you need to move things a lot more slower and in physically incorrect positions to get the kind of look that you want from the impacts. And this is true for foot dust impacts, crash scenes, things with collisions involving bullets or weapons. You really just need to sort of set up the scene so that you get the right particle animation without necessarily having the technically correct collision object moving the way that it would in real life. So the way I've hand animated these bullets is I've staggered them across the scene and I've just keyframed them to rise up at a certain speed. So initially I did them a lot slower and they were too slow to coming up through the water. And then when I re-changed them, they were too fast and they actually went through the water without having any frames intersecting with the water. So there was no actual collision animation. So unless you're doing sub-frame sampling, you really need to be careful your animation lines up with the actual colliding with the water at certain frames so that you're able to get collision simulation happening. Because if the geometry is underneath the fluid on frame 11 and above the fluid on frame 12, it's not going to be able to process the in-between subframe animation of that collision. So what I've done in this scene is each one of these geometries has been given a set as a Bifrost collider, but it's also been set as a Bifrost accelerator. Now the reason for that is that when you just set them as a Bifrost collider, they intersect with the water, but they don't pull the water upwards into the air in a very dramatic way. You can see the water is being pulled vertically by these spheres to create a really dramatic, vertical, tall looking kind of splash that looks really similar to the 50 caliber Navy videos that I used as reference on YouTube. So when the guns shoot the 50 cal bullets into the ocean on the test range, the water explodes up like 25 feet in the air, exactly like these are, but at higher speed. So, Bifrost is a little bit sort of slow motion looking, but, that's just the limitations of the, of the software at the moment. You can always speed that up in comp anyway. But basically, you want the splashes to go upwards, not outwards. So if you just have them as a collision object, you'll find that they just blast holes through the water without pulling any of the water up. Similarly, the first test that I tried was just using accelerators without any collisions. So I thought if I can shoot that water upwards without any collision, maybe that'll make a really cool, like, bullet effect that'll look really, really impressive. But however, it didn't quite have the explosive effect. It just sort of stretched the water particles up like a shape, a geometric shape, and it didn't really give us the effect we needed. So both collision and acceleration is required. So right now you can see the Bifrost accelerator influence is 5, which is a good setting. If you set it to 10, the water droplets will actually get trapped in and around the sphere. The accelerated direction is -1, so that's operating in the vertical axis. And if you have the Bifrost accelerator influence too low, it creates a sort of dribbly, sort of breakfast cereal type effect as well, and doesn't look as good. So I found that the Bifrost accelerator influence 5 was a good setting to use. So what we're going to do is take this bullet and remove it from the Bifrost simulation, and then we're going to resimulate it and see what effect it has when you add collision and when you add acceleration. So once you've selected the sphere, we're going to go ahead and de-link the sphere from the fluid. So to do that, all you have to do is select the sphere, select the Bifrost shape, and then you just press Bifrost, remove collider, or remove accelerator. So when you create new, we're going to pretend that this is a new, like a new sphere that we've created and animated. However, when you create stuff from scratch and add accelerator and collision shapes, they sometimes keep their attributes on them, even though they're not, they don't collide with the geometry. So what you'll see here is, if we just pause the video and I'll run this simulation, once the collision object is switched off, it no longer interacts with the Bifrost liquid, even though the parameters might still be visible in the outliner. So you can see here, this is the sphere that we've switched off, this one in the middle there, and we can see that it will intersect with the water without having any effect on the Bifrost simulation. So you can see that all the parameters are switched off, and we can now set these parameters. So the reason why I've sort of shown you a finished scene first, and then we're going to play around with the settings, is it takes so long to find the right settings for these water simulations, and the trial and error is really labor intensive to get the right values to put on there. I mean, you could put Bifrost accelerator influence 100 and sim it 10 times to get it down to 5, and have all different collision settings, and it's just really frustrating to try and get right. So we're just going to work from the final thing backwards and play around with the values just to experiment, to show where it is incorrect, and then that way you'll be able to know, you'll be operating in a more safer sort of range of values. So what we've done is I've just set that sphere to collide only with no accelerator influence, and you can see what happens is it blasts through the water, but instead of the water blasting upwards, the water actually blasts outwards. So there's so many interesting effects that you get from these accelerators and colliders. and see when that ball flies through that thin particle layer, it just blasts the water straight outwards, away from the point of impact, and though that's probably technically correct for the motion of the sphere that we're using, I'm really trying to fake the 50 cal water, World War II firing into the water type effect, not like blast the water out like that. So you can see straight away that, just using colliders will get you the particle animation for water exploding like out of the scene, but it won't actually move the water, in the direction of the colliding object. So this is particularly important if you're animating a creature like Godzilla or a Transformer or some kind of creature that's coming out of water and swinging its arm around, or you pulling a gun up out of the water, or a submarine that's like surfacing over the water. Using the collider, accelerator settings and collision is good because it pulls the water with the vehicle arm or the creature weapon and things like that. So you can see here, I've just got in a notepad the final settings for that sphere, so that you can add them on if you want to get it right. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn off collision and turn on acceleration only, and then resimulate. So accelerators will move the particles in the velocity of the animated objects. So those spheres, if they're passing through that water, they should actually propel the particles that interact with that water with the with the spheres. And when you have sort of high settings, these can create some interesting results too, because it kind of looks like underwater explosions happening underneath the surface of the water from where that bullet is hitting. But you can see, even though it's sort of pulling the water upwards, it doesn't explode. So it's missing out on the explosive dramatic effect that we're getting with the collision. So from trial and error, I increased the Bifrost accelerator influence to 10 and 25 and different values. And what I found is it kind of created like just a big mushroom, stretched mushroom type effect, instead of creating the the splash effect. So once you've got the animation set, the best way to go about it is to use a combination of different effects rather than just using collisions or just accelerators for things that are interacting with the water. And keep your settings pretty low for the accelerator, like values of 5 or values of 1, because how it works is the software actually so to add an object as a collider and a accelerator, what you do is you select the object, select the Bifrost shape, and then you go up to Bifrost and you say add accelerator and add collider. And once you've done that, you'll be able to simulate the shot, and then you'll see the effects of the shape doing collision and acceleration. All right, so now I've just pre-simmed this RAM cached this simulation with the bullet impact sphere set as an accelerator and as a collider. And we can see here you get a nice explosive splash, plus you get the vertical height from the bullet hit. So you can see on the last bullet that comes out, there's a little bit too much acceleration. All these have the same settings, but you can see that the particles that are being pulled out of that deeper water are getting pulled along with the velocity of the ball, and they're actually creating a little bit of a sort of error there where they fly up into the air and they kind of go past the inherit too much velocity from the bullets. So a lot of these splashes are underneath the bridge anyway, so it's going to look pretty cool just going up, hitting the bridge and then falling down. But the main thing is that you're getting that vertical height, plus you're kind of splashing and spraying the water outwards as well. So yeah, we're pretty happy with that result. So the main thing to think about is you test a small little chunk of water without too much resolution and too much slow speed on it. And then once you've set that, and you're happy with the settings on it, and it's working to your liking, you can then extend that water right out to the final scale of your shot. So you need to plan your shots out carefully, so you're not going to be using like 16 kilometers of Bifrost water. You're really just going to be having small little sections that are right in front of the camera for this kind of hero water. And Bifrost water is expensive in CPU time and in render time to create. So you're really going to sparingly use it only for the most kind of extensive, like really hero water work where it's interacting and spraying everywhere. So all you need to do to make this the whole length of the dock, which is what we set up, is select the emitter geometry, clear the cache, disable the scene, and save. I'm just going to save that so it doesn't crash in case it crashes. So you select the collision geometry, and you also select the emitter geometry. And once you've done that and the Bifrost simulation is disabled, you can just scale these, scale the different geometry lengthwise and acrosswise if you want as well. And then that way that should fill the length of the water that you want to have interact with it. So people were saying, oh, how come it doesn't go all the way to the horizon like in an ocean? You can definitely do that, but the simulation times and the particle count is going to be really heavy. So I would actually recommend rendering, if you were doing this scene as a wide ocean sort of shot, you'd have the bullet impacts as a Bifrost simulation with an accelerator mesh over the top, which we're going to do in the next lesson. And you would then blend that in comp with some layers of the Bifrost particle sim of the bullets flying up through the mesh. And once you're happy with the scale and you've rescaled it, all you need to do is run a disk cache, and that will actually run the particle simulation and save it to disk, which will be saved onto particle cache files per frame. So per frame, they can make file sizes of up to about, from 250 meg up to about 2 gig per frame. So that's why scratch caching, which loads into RAM, isn't a very good idea, because what happens is each frame of this particle cache can be like 2 gig of RAM per frame. So if you only have 16 or 32 gigs in your computer, that can be used up in 16 frames of animation. So it's a good idea to disable the background processing, disable the scratch cache, and just don't run scratch caches when you've got such high particle counts. With this max particle display count, one thing that you might need to do is just max that out by hitting lots of 9s in there, because if that's set to 50,000 or 100,000, when you have finished just particle simulation, you'll be crushed to see that, oh no, it's just this sparse looking epoxy low res sim, but it actually isn't. What's happened is it's maxing out the display particles, and it's not actually loading the full amount into your scene. So once you've done your cache, you just need to create a folder that you're going to save the disk cache into and keep it on a drive that has plenty of hard disk space. And then write the cache name down. So for this one, we're going to put water cache. The cache format is BIF. Then we're going to set the start and end time to 1 and 190. And then you just hit create. So once you hit create, it will sort of freeze out the software. And this is usually something you do at 5 p.m. when you're about to head home. And your computer won't be usable for the next, however amount of time that you're doing it for. But you will see a blue timeline slider in the bottom of the window while it's running the disk cache. So this particular particle sim takes about 4 minutes a frame on a i5 computer with 16 gig of RAM. So I would expect better times, on a better computer. And then once it's finished, you can load it into your scene and check it out. All right, next we're going to have a look at doing a Bifrost deep ocean scene and how the Bifrost accelerators actually work, not for doing bullets, but for doing actual waves. So we're going to do some pretty extreme settings on this, just so I can explain to you how the actual deep ocean demo scene works and how these accelerators work on the mesh, on the particles. Because what happens is you can easily get confused and not actually understand how these accelerators are working if you don't play around with the settings so that you can get the right effects that you're wanting. Basically, how they work is they're kind of like they influence the particles' motion in a set axis based on the movement or position of the animated geometry. So this scene here has got a cardboard box basically filled with water particles, and because of the depth of this box, it's actually quite a slow simulation to run. So if we disable the Bifrost simulation, that square polygon cube is the water geometry emitter, and this surface here is this killer ocean accelerator mesh. And if we set this to 500 and we just go to the stop and play it back, so there's also motion geometry. It's animated with a texture somehow to move like this procedurally. And what procedurally means is that it's kind of like adjustable non-destructively. So I can go into the texture or the settings and change the way that the sea moves without breaking the animation. So you can see here, this is basically how it works. The strength parameter is deciding how much in the horizontal axis the sea is actually translated based on that noise texture. So you can see here, if you put it down to 1.8, it's just sort of flat like a pond. But as you increase it up to 2 or 1.5, it's more like a storm, and you just need to put it into the position that you think works best. So if we go into the texture that's driving this simulation, we can see that the ocean is being driven by this wave noise map. So if you change the scale on it, it dramatically affects the look of the water surface. So that's at a scale of 1, that's at a scale of 3, that's at a scale of 4, and so on and so forth. And that will affect the movement and the position of the wave deformation. So it's very important that you choose the right scale for your scene so that you're getting the correct movement of this accelerator mesh. Now, be advised that at the edges of your simulation where that shoebox type collision thing is, that's actually going to splash up the side. So don't be too precious about trying to get exactly over the top of this geometry, because it's not going to work like that. It's not going to flow off the edge of the sea. It's going to intersect with the walls of this colliding sea. So don't be too fanatical about getting the Bifrost simulation to exactly match up to this accelerator mesh, because it's an actual live particle sim, whereas this is just a texture map being played over a geometry. One of the other helpful things that you can set up with this ocean scene, which is great for helicopter chases or boats driving along the water and stuff like that, is it's actually got a wind. It's actually got a wind UV coordinates, observer speed, and all these other different settings that we're going to have a quick look through. So the observer speed, as you do it, actually replicates a like a boat driving along water, like a speedboat, or a helicopter coming over the ocean. Totally awesome for movies like Black Hawk Down, where you've got the helis coming in over the sea to drop the special forces troops off and stuff like that. So it's also really good for, like, if you've got a scene where a ship is stationary in the frame, but the sea is actually going forwards through the sea. So instead of having to do like dozens and dozens of meters or kilometers of water, you can just simulate, put a shader on this ocean and have the observer speed set up. So that's a great parameter there that you can load in. So the frequency is just the noise frequency, and you can see that in the texture map up the top. And if you adjust that up or down, you get a different frequency of the actual wave pattern. And the wave directional speed is just the wave directional spread is changing the dispersion of the texture map, so it changes the effect of these of the noise that's being generated. So you can adjust these settings to get the right effect before you simulate your Bifrost scene. So just know that this is just a basis for pushing and pulling the particles. It's not actually going to look exactly the same as this surface. It's just a basic starting point to get you going. So once we've got the ocean looking the way we want for our test section of the water, so you might have a much bigger scene of water that you're planning on doing, but this is just a small area that's manageable to test out and see how it's working. So we're pretty happy with the movement, speed, height, and noise distribution and things like that of this ocean geometry. And now what we're going to do is we're going to get our Bifrost shape, enable it, and then we're going to run the simulation and see how it looks. So I've enabled the Bifrost simulation and cached it through to about 60 frames. And now we can get an indication of how this mesh is actually influencing the Bifrost liquids. So these are two completely separate, just to explain what's going on here. The particles and the mesh are in no way linked to each other. The only way they're linked is by influencing the wave of the water, that's the geometry, is influencing the movement of the particles. So what's happening is the position of the geometry in the vertical axis is pushing or pulling the the particles up or down, and then they're naturally flowing the way that they would with the Bifrost simulation, and then that is then creating this turbulent, wavy pool after a few frames. And you can see at this first couple of frames, as you scrub through it, it creates kind of like the same effect as the bullets coming up through the water. It creates a kind of mushroomy effect where doesn't sort of splash out or anything like that. And then it starts to get those nice sharp splashy liquid edges. You can see here also our waves are actually rebounding off the sides of the fluid container, and that's something to think of when you're doing these waves in the ocean, because there's no colliding edge to hit up against. So you need to make your box big enough so that you don't get waves hitting the extents of your fluid simulation scene, bouncing off and then flowing back into your sim. This would be more like a stormy like a stormy area beside a ship's hull or beside a dock, and it's actually slapping up against the wall of a medieval base or a dock or something like that, and that's the sort of area the camera's seeing. But that's not to worry. A lot of shots, like in Game of Thrones or in different films, have got colliding shapes, and that's where the film is set, is up against the walls of a fortress or something like that. So just be aware that you have to really, for those open ocean scenes, you're going to have to give it a bit more room to simulate out and get those waves happening with enough edge room. But as we can see here, with this mesh set at its default settings, that actually creates quite a turbulent wave effect. So we can see that it's not precisely in line with the water geometry. It's actually not underneath or on top of it either. So you can see it's not actually a container that's pushing the geometry in. What's actually happening is it's influencing the particles. So you can see here, the settings it's got is Bifrost Accelerator Influence 1, Bifrost Accelerator Inherent Velocity 1, Fall Off Bandwidth 1, Accelerator Direction Magnitude 10, Bifrost Accelerator Direction X, Y, and Z. It's Y, 1 in the Y-axis, which is the vertical axis, and then it says Boundary Layer Bandwidth 1. So all these settings are pretty important, especially the direction magnitude, because as you increase or decrease that, that's going to affect the way that the waves interact with the mesh that's accelerating this water. So you can see already the power of accelerators to create fast, cheap, and easy turbulence effects on your water. And the more that you animate and manipulate these accelerator meshes, the more power it's going to give you to control the fluid simulations. So if people are asking you to, get these happening more, it's going to work a lot easier. So what we're going to do now is, instead of setting the accelerator parameter to 10, I've set it to 1 so I can show you how it actually affects the liquid simulation. So before, the magnitude was set to 10 of the directional magnitude of the Bifrost mesh. Of the Maya ocean mesh. And now we can see that the particles are actually moving much more subtly, and they're not creating like these large cresting breaking waves. They're just creating like this kind of gentle undulating kind of pool type fluid sim look. And that could be good for the beach where the bullets are, because if you're not wanting anything too dramatic and drastic, if the water is calm, but you need some natural movement on it, you can just reduce the put an accelerator on there and reduce the settings, so that you're not blasting water all over the place in a big mess. But what we're going to do now is, what we really want to try and get is a vicious tropical storm in the water. So what we're going to do now is set these settings way up to try and get like a breaking kind of deep ocean tsunami kind of wave effect happening. Or not like a tsunami wave, more like just a really vicious, stormy, turbulent water, as if it's like in the middle of a perfect storm. So we're going to increase these values so that there's more vicious kind of like wave pattern that's coming up here, so we can really like get this water churning up and exploding up into the, like flying up into the air. So just going to change the number of frequencies and the the basic position of this water, and increase the strength a little bit, or possibly increase the the value of the wave height, so that we can get that really cranking right up to higher values. And once we've done that, we should be able to find that we can get a really mean turbulent particle look. So what we're going to do is we're going to just experiment and see what happens when we put big values into this particle accelerator. Because what's going to happen is depending on how violent this is, we don't really know how this is going to influence the particles, because the other thing we've done was more like a little lake bed or something like that, rather than a vicious waves. So we're going to set this particle. We've got the waves looking really mean now, and that's really going to turn the water up at the default settings. But we put the particle influencer on there at 20. So that's going to just throw that water all over the place, which is going to look awesome. So we're not really sure what outcome we'll get from this, but let's just run pause the video, run a sim, and we'll check out what's happened. But all these different experiments can be really handy for different scenarios that you may not anticipate. So we've just run 60 frames of this sim, and we can see that we've just got this awesome error that looks like a kraken exploding out of the sea. And due to the extremely high settings on the magnitude of this wave, we just have this awesome effect of some kind of deep sea ancient creature exploding out of the water as that wave kind of like peels along there, and it just throws the water right up into the air with these beautiful arcs of liquid water kind of coming up. And it kind of looks like there's some kind of vehicle or craft that's like flying out from under the water, or a Pacific Rim robot like smashing out. So it hasn't actually created the waves that we wanted. What it's created is an explosion, basically, of some kind of fierce underwater vehicle surfacing or monster surfacing. So this could be really good, even though this isn't the look we were going for. This could be really awesome for like a scene where you have a vehicle crashing into the sea, so you can animate an accelerator wave like going in front of the spaceship or the character that's rippling in front, and the accelerator can actually throw the water up in the air as they crash in. Or you can also use it as a kind of like explosives that are being fired into the water, like in front of a ship or in front of a building or something like that. So it's a totally awesome way to set it. So we're just going to crank our settings down a bit and see if we can get this wave happening. So with the settings set to back to 10, it's still a little bit too much. So we're going to go with 5 and resim that and check out how it looks. So with it set at 5, you can see that you get a really nice effect that's not too dramatic. And after you've gotten past the first 50 or 60 frames, the other couple of hundred of frames would be pretty awesome at like a vicious, stormy sea that like you'd be in a lifeboat and you'd be like, oh no, totally screwed. So it's like you can really get the you get these kind of like breaking off parts of the water, as well as the churning whitewash and the really vicious waves and the water flying up in the air, but it doesn't fly up too much, like there's bombs under the water, like the first test that we did. So if you kept this simulation running and you ran it over a larger area, this would actually create a pretty good foamy like waves effect for like around the outside of a sort of ocean battle or near a ship that was in a storm and things like that, which is exactly what this software is designed to do, is to make that kind of water breaking off effect that is impossible to do with mya218 shaders. So that's pretty even though the start sort of like mushroomy area, you eventually, it will sim out. That could be in your pre-roll, and then it'll just go into this kind of undulating foamy mass of water. Just be cautious of your particles that are kind of coming off the bottom there. You might need to set up a kill plane so that you're not simulating the particles that have gone outside the container and flown down the bottom, because you'll actually have to simulate those per frame as you're going, and it does chew up a lot of memory. So yeah, when you run your final shot, it might be like the side of a pirate ship, or like a big submarine coming out of the water, or some kind of like tug, like a little lifeboat being thrown around in a storm. What you would do is you would just scale up the size of your accelerator mesh, add some more geometry in there, and then don't forget to increase your noise value so that it's putting the texture smaller with more frequency in there, so that you get more kind of like dynamic wave patterns and not just like spreading it out so it looks really flat. And then all you have to do is keep all the settings the same, but just run the simulation bigger and cache it to disk the same way as we did with the bullets coming out of the sea simulation. Now, be prepared for long sim times with these deep water ocean sims. I mean, the water is it's a lot of particles interacting with each other. It's going to take a long time to finish simulating that stuff. Maybe like up to 30 minutes a frame. So just be gentle with it and test it a lot on these smaller sized scenes until you get the kind of behavior and look that you're looking for. But I mean, when that renders out, that's going to look really cool in CG, and you're going to really get a great effect out of that. Next week, we're going to be having a look at how to paint Bifrost attributes. Bifrost, because it's integrated into Maya, has the ability to include painted attributes so that you can hand customize your simulations. The other thing that we're going to have a look at next week is Bifrost droplets. Droplets is one of the critical settings that sets how water breaks off from the main simulation. So stay tuned, and we'll delve into these topics next week, and I'll catch you then.